Tax talk captured the political debate in Canberra today. The Climate Change Minister said the carbon tax isn't a tax, while Tony Abbott admitted his 1.5% levy on big business for paid parental scheme is. Meanwhile, the coalition has opened a bigger lead over the government in the latest opinion polls. Political correspondent Tom Eagleton reports from Canberra.
Tony Abbott was keeping his cool as technical difficulties bedevilled his morning radio appearance with John Laws.
Why doesn't somebody check this before I come to this dump?
Are there switches here that need to be flicked?
No.
After his microphone was switched back on,
I'm under no timetable pressure, John.
Mr Abbott admitted an interest in this morning's Nielsen poll results.
I certainly read them, John. There's no doubt about that. I mean, every politician looks at them.
Labor's primary vote has again dipped. It's now just 1 point off its record low of 26% and has dropped 7 points in the last month. Meanwhile, the coalition's opened up a devastating 14-point lead in the two-party preferred stakes, and Mr Abbott's maintained his lead as preferred Prime Minister despite a slight dip.
Look, I'm sure that many of my colleagues are gratified when they see all this, but in the end it's not about us and it's not about me.
Listen, we're not groping for excuses. We know we're behind in the polls. We know we've got to work harder.
The result was so bad there was even some muted leadership speculation in some sections of the media.
It's almost like some people are like, in the media, like recovering addicts missing out on leadership speculation. That matter was put to bed, it's been dealt with.
You've done that display pretty well, haven't you?
Having made their choice, senior ALP figures are saying Julia Gillard can still win.
We're only at half-time in this electoral race. The scoreboard can say all sorts of things halfway through the mark, halfway through the game.
And if there were an election now, we'd be defeated. But the fact is, in a genuine election, Australians are going to look at the alternative. And they're going to look at whether Tony Abbott has got policies or just slogans.
But it was the government who was accused of sloganeering today after the Climate Change Minister denied that charging businesses for carbon emissions amounted to a tax.
It's not a tax, it's an emissions trading scheme that starts with a fixed price period. Let's just get that straight again from the start.
Mr Combet expressly said it's not a tax. This government is in carbon tax denial. The carbon tax is a tax, it's always been a tax, it always will be a tax.
But the opposition leader was also having a taxing time explaining his scheme to charge big businesses 1.5% of earnings to fund his paid parental leave scheme.
That's a great big tax.
Well, it's a modest levy, which I hope...
It's a tax.
Well, I'm not going to get into a terminological argument with you, John.
Why?
Eventually, the opposition leader conceded.
It will be paid for by a levy or a tax, if you prefer that term, on larger companies.
A more immediate economic concern than all that tax talk is tomorrow's Reserve Bank board meeting. All year the bank's disappointed expectations of a rate cut, and tomorrow it'll have another opportunity after an unofficial measure today showed inflation well under control and raised hopes again that the board is finally ready to move. Tom Eagleton, Late Line.